Welcome to the Rev View podcast, where we explore all things B2B revenue generation and acceleration for sales and marketing leaders. I'm your host, John Ball, and I'm joined by the Lane of Durham Lane. You guessed it, Richard Lane, who is the co-founder and chief commercial officer here at Durham Lane, and the creator of the Selling at a High Level methodology, which has really been at the bedrock of the Durham Lane business for the last 10 to 12 years, and of course, many of our clients. Richard, unfortunately, wasn't able to join us in our newly decorated podcast room, given the fact he has to isolate, unfortunately. So he's joining us over Zoom. But nonetheless, Richard, it's great to have you here, albeit virtually.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, the king of self-isolation. My third period over what seems like the last 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm sorry not to be with you, but pleased to be speaking with you on this afternoon.
Your third stint. I've had two recently, as you know, and probably most people do. So.
Yeah, I should probably also worth saying that I do consider myself very fortunate in the fact that I haven't got it, and we do have the luxury of being able to work and self-isolate, and I don't underestimate the value of that, and appreciate the fact that we have that flexibility and we can still get on with doing what we do, and shield or self-isolate as required.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here today to talk around selling at a high level. I've obviously talked around the importance of it for our business and for others. So maybe a good place to start, Richard, is tell us what is it, how did it come about, and why?
Right. Okay. So selling at a higher level is our proven methodology. It's a really simple framework that helps sales professionals, business professionals, anyone really that wants to, business owners, anyone that feels they need to have constructive conversations and spend their time where they can be most successful. It's a framework that helps them achieve that. Where did it come from? Well, I've had very fortunate to have had a successful career in the commercial world. I stepped out of that. I used to work for a company called Skillsoft, the world's largest e-learning company. I stepped out of Skillsoft, what is now 12 years ago, set up my own consultancy, and part of that really was, how do I help particularly scaling organizations to think differently about sales? And Lee and I are very, very proud about the sales profession and being sales professionals and raising the bar of the sales profession, and selling at a high level has really been a key component that helps us achieve that. It enables us to give people a strong grounding in what it takes to be a sales professional very, very quickly, and get them to performance. And as you said, it sits as, I call it the DNA of Durham Lane, really. So it sits in, right at the heart of everything that we do.
Thanks, Richard. Has the methodology changed at all since you first created it?
Yeah, it has. As I mentioned, Sean, it is a framework. So there are five phases to selling at a high level. You've got find and create, define, understand, propose, recommend, present, close out, serve and grow. And underneath those 5 phases in the journey, really, of how do we help people to buy from us, there are tools, techniques, blueprints, ways of thinking, ways of doing. Our mantras, our 10 sales marketing mantras, all form part of that. Our Magic 35 qualification toolkit, probably one of the most important bits of IP that we've created. They all sit within it. However, it is a flexible, very simple, straightforward framework. And I used to have sleepless nights, Sean, thinking, is this all too easy? Is it all too simple? It's sort of obvious. And actually, what I found is that I could drop off to sleep by thinking often the best things are. I think of songs that you listen to, that some of the most famous songs, some of the most successful songs ever written are just the simplest melodies, the simplest tunes. So I'm not comparing selling at a high level to anything by the Beatles, for example, but same principle maybe applies in that simplicity is a great thing. And I think finally, the other benefit of simplicity is that when you're at the beginning of your journey, it's easy to grasp, and then you start following it and creating momentum and developing yourself as a sales professional.
I think doing basics well is kind of obvious, but if it's so obvious and easy, why doesn't everybody do it? And I think the world of selling, as you've said, hasn't always been considered a profession. I know you told me that anecdote once before where, what was it? So your careers advisor at school said that she didn't say you should be a salesperson, did she?
No, I was told I'd be great in market research, and actually, salesperson wasn't even on a list of options. And there's something that, again, a real passion of mine is how do we professionalize the world of selling. I always sort of joke that marketing has done a much better job of selling itself than sales has. My brother came back from university, got a job in marketing, and everyone was delighted. I came back having not managed to become a rock star and got a job in sales, which people were sort of thinking, well, what does that mean? What exactly what are you going to be doing? What are you going to be selling? There's this sort of inherent distrust of even that word, sales and selling. So back to universities though, unless this has changed recently, I don't believe it has. Then a selling role is not even considered to be a graduate degree. So a university won't signpost that as an opportunity because it won't count against, ironically, their quota, which is very sales. So lots of work to do. We work with the APS. They're doing some good work there in terms of raising the bar. I was part of a all across party parliamentary group last year or the year before about the sales profession and the value, frankly, it should and does play into UK PLC.
So when are you going to run for Parliament off the back of that good work, Richard?
Yeah, not any time soon, I don't think. But
So in terms of the professionalization, sometimes when I speak to some of the new stars at Germany or just anybody really about the world of sales, I come, as you know, I'm a marketing person. You mentioned there that marketing has done a better job of selling itself than sales, which is ironic, I guess, in many ways, and that kind of perception of it being perhaps a more esteemed profession, yet it's the most important part of any business. Most important part of any business, absolutely, by far, something that people don't always consider. But I think some of the reasons for why it's not considered that way is how it's been done in the past. And I wanted to pick up on something that you talked about, which is fundamental to one of the stages, which is obviously define and understand. Well, throughout really, but especially define and understand. You mentioned Magic 35 as a qualification toolkit. Can you just explain a bit more about what that is and how it's used?
Yeah, again, I mean, it is probably the most important piece of IP that we've created, I would suggest, and it's frankly around qualifying an opportunity. So, and again, this came out of my frustration really in my corporate life around how on earth could I understand what was going on with the deals that my team throughout the country were working on, and again, just dead simple, budget, define need, compelling event, competition, timescales, decision maker, etc. And part of what we do at Durham Lane is we train, coach, and develop our staff. We use the 70-20-10 learning model to really immerse people in the world of sales, but we use that to ensure we're asking the right questions. And our third sales mantra, be interested to be interesting, is a really important piece of that jigsaw, I'd suggest as well. So that all sits inside of our selling at a high level framework, and we use the right tools at the right time to create the value that our customers demand from us.
Thanks, Richard. Are there any particular examples over the last 10 to 12 years where selling at a high level as a framework has worked particularly well?
So if I think back to the very first engagement, so this is slightly pre Durham Lane years. So this is, a year and a half prior to Durham Lane being formed. But when I first set up my consultancy, I was working with a client, and they got a quote in, and typically, ordinarily, they would have quoted, I think it was something like 3.5K on the back of the request for price. So I was working with the MD at the time. He grabbed hold of this opportunity, and we used selling at a high level to run it differently. And he closed, I think it was a £250,000 order, and the client was Microsoft. So following just the way they used to work, he would have put in a quote, his sales guy would have put a quote for 3.5K in. As it was, that became a multi-year contract for his company and an absolute flagship brand and client. And, really, what did they do differently? They asked some questions, they put some thought into it, they did a bit of preparation and planning, they dug deeper, they got into our 3 level of questions and all of that sort of thing, and they qualified. And that's a pretty stark example of the difference some structure and a framework can make to your business.
Thanks, Richard. Do you think that the early stages of what you spoke through there in terms of find and create, define and understand, has traditionally lent itself more to inside sales functions, sales typically being structured in inside and field sales, and the latter stages are more aligned to field sales functions? And if so, has that changed recently?
Yeah, using Durham Lane is a good example. We spin up demand and lead gen teams to create qualified opportunity for our customers. We typically spend all of our time in find and create and into define and understand, and then we pass the qualified opportunity across to our clients, either field teams or sales teams, whatever it might be. This shift was starting to happen pre-COVID. I think COVID, like with many things, has just accelerated the shift. But the world is moving to more of an inside sales motion, I would suggest. But as of March last year, there were no events to go to. There was no meeting up with people. None of that happened, and so everyone was forced into doing this type of work, which I appreciate was really challenging for lots of people that perhaps for 5, 10, 15, 20 years hadn't had to sit at their desk and think about, how do I find some new customers? So I think that is shifting. One development for us is that move to we've from a marketing services point of view, we've gone up funnel into the digital realm as more of the buying journey goes online, but we're also going the other way to capture more, do more of the demo, nurture and close for our customers. It is definitely changing. Will everything stop and shift to one mode of work? No, I don't think it will. Will people get back on the streets and on the road and back in their cars and onto planes, etc.? Yes, they will. Will they do it as much? I really doubt it. Really interested to see what happens.
Yeah, there was a period of time where many people, including you and I, were traveling to London all over every week, every other week. It was almost the done thing. If you didn't physically go there, you almost didn't value the deal or the opportunity or the meeting as much. Whereas I think these days, if you were to go and insist on meeting somebody, especially London, they'd probably just ask you why, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really fascinating shift. I was chatting to a friend who's a CEO of a software firm about this the other day, and I think the intensity of the intent of meeting someone face to face will be really advantageous in very specific situations. But I think there will be more situations where people go, "Why are you coming to see me? Can we not just do it over Teams?" And actually that is a different thing. You're going to have different skills. You could argue charisma is less important in the virtual world than it is face to face. you might argue the other way, I suppose, depending on what you're doing. If you're running a training session, we know this because we were doing blended anyway, but we flipped everything now to virtual, and your charisma needs to be accentuated to capture people online. However, if you're in a discovery call with someone, then it's not the same environment than if you're sitting with them in a or up with them till 3 a.m. at a conference or whatever it might be. So different skills will be required. Everything will still be required, but probably just in different degrees.
Some people talk a lot around understanding buying signals and building rapport and feeding off buying signals in a sales scenario. Do you think it's harder to do that over video calls and remote?
Well, I think that there are verbal and non-verbal cues, aren't there? So verbal ones probably no different, non-verbal much more difficult. I think the probably a bigger factor is that the number of decision makers, or the number of people, needed to make a decision has significantly grown. So that's not based. Well, the numbers grown is based on research, but whether I think that's making it harder or not, I'm not sure. We've certainly through COVID seen we can still create opportunity. We've got customers that are still closing deals. And people still, need to buy the right fit service at the right time, and need to see value delivered. And I can't see that changing.
Yeah, I'm going to plug this because we're about to publish our B2B buyers survey, which is a big research piece we did on trying to understand how buyer habits have changed. And one of those, without preempting it too much, one of those findings, Richard, reinforces exactly what you've just said there. All buying units have increased. All buying decisions have been elongated and increased scrutiny over budget.
Yeah. And I think, what is a really interesting point in this sort of new world that we're in and we're moving further into is, you can, as a sales professional, you can be supported by a much wider network of experts in your business than ever before, right? Because someone can drop into a Zoom call or a Teams call. They can be part of a work group. You can do a whiteboard session. You can have breakout rooms. Actually, geographical boundaries are a lot less of a hazard than they ever have been before for us. So, that I think is going to be a real advantage. What we've always found, just to tie us back to why we're talking this afternoon, is that when you give all of that community a consistent language of doing business, which is really what selling at a high level is, then that's when you can start achieving amazing things. So, I mentioned right at the top of this call, whether you're a sales professional, a business professional, a consultant, a business owner, whatever you might, a solutions architect, a customer success director, account manager, etc., then it's still relevant, because selling at a higher level is really how do we help people to buy from us. It's not how do we sell to people, it's how do we help people to buy from us. And there is a real difference in that mindset. And again, the mantras help with that. The methodology is supported by our qualification framework. All of the tools and techniques that sit in it all go to help. And then those 5 phases, and we do some really, really exciting work with clients on this, is sucking out all of our content and putting in all of their behaviors and ways of working into those 5 phases. And you get some really cool moments when you do that exercise.
Are there any particular cool moments or highlights that spring to mind?
Yeah, I'm not going to mention the company name, and this is back in the days of being in a workshop classroom with people. But myself and Luke, who we were co-delivering on that day, we both stood back at the other end of the room and just looked as this group of people from 4 or 5 different divisions of their organization all stood clustered together with 5 white flip chart pads on the window and just were filling them out. And what was really fascinating was they were all crowded in the middle, which is the place where everyone's comfortable making recommendations, writing proposals, talking about us all the time. And then over the course of the program, we got them focusing on how do you create new opportunity? How do you get into define and understand to make sure that proposal you're writing is meaningful and is solving the problem that has been identified and addressing that? How do you then close out? How do you, once you've captured them as a customer, how do you serve and grow and help them to improve their business further? And over the course of that program, we took them from being this sort of cluster in the middle to spreading out across the methodology and the framework, and seeing how that all worked together across multiple teams was just fabulous.
Do you think you could do that now in this day and age?
We are doing it. It's not as good, mind, but we are doing it. It's not go and speak to Luke about that. He'll tell you that, get me in front of them. But we're just talking to a client yesterday about, we've done a UK pilot. We're talking to them about now doing the same for their Australian and US teams. So, we've done that before, and when we can continue to do it, and but it's not the same.
What do you think the future holds for selling at a high level as a methodology and a framework for sales?
I think the framework is, again, simplicity is key, right? So how do we help people to buy from us? The framework, I can't see changing. I think it is, and I believe and hope will remain very valid. I think within each of the phases and within each of the sections, I can see, and I do see, new ways of working being added, new technologies. So, for example, when I created Selling at a High Level, in Find and Create, video prospecting wasn't even a thing. That's now in there because it's part of the way that you can do Find and Create. So that will always adapt and develop. But the phases, I believe, are valid. Again, as I've said lots of times, it's really reflecting how we buy. I don't think how we buy particularly is changing at the macro level, but what we're doing inside of that journey is shifting all the time.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you for joining us